But our view has been very clear that we don't want a regime change. We do not want to protract this or build this out any more than it's already been built out. We want to end their nuclear program, and then we want to talk to the Iranians about a long-term settlement here. We believe very strongly that there are two pathways. There's a pathway where Iran continues to fund terrorism, continues to try to build a nuclear program, attacks American troops. That's the bad pathway for Iran, and it will be met with overwhelming force. There's another pathway on the table here. There's a pathway where Iran integrates itself into the international community, stops funding terrorism, and stops trying to pursue a nuclear weapon. This is a reset. This is an opportunity for the Iranians to take the smart path. We certainly hope that they will.
So is America headed to an all-out war, or is nothing really going to happen or come out of this? That is the big question on everyone's mind right now. And at the current moment, I got to say I'm mostly leaning towards I don't think that you're going to see America in a regime change war. I'll say I fully believe the administration when they say that is not their intent or goal here. But I think the prevailing concern is, well, if Iran retaliates, and whatever that retaliation looks like, you may get into this doom spiral of constant escalation against one another. And then at a certain point, you're kind of left out of options to where regime change war is the only thing we basically have, in a sense, baited ourselves into. But as I've been saying, right, that is the ultimate test right now of Trump's presidency. It's a test of leadership. Can you achieve your objective that, he takes very importantly here of not allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon, while at the same time fulfilling the promise of keeping America out of new endless global wars and conflicts? We want to break down and discuss, I guess, those prevailing questions in today's video, because first of all, I want to show you some highlights of the Pentagon press conference that took place this morning, where the administration is still doubling down here, saying that they don't want war after this. Trump, of course, called for peace the very moment that it happened, but you now have Pete Hegseth and other administration officials saying, look, we are different from the Bush administration. We have this problem with Iran's nuclear program, but our intent here is not regime change. At the same time, the question is not necessarily if they want regime change. I think it is, will Iran's escalation or retaliation result in a wider war? So with that said, in this video, I want to analyze basically both sides of that story, because we both have a declaration today of America saying no regime change, and Iran already taking its first steps of retaliation. Where's this all going to go? Well, I want to break that down for you. So first though, folks, do us a big favor. As usual, if you enjoy the content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing here, guys, is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, so, as I've been saying, I'm not the biggest fan of what's happening right now, but I'm also not hysteric about it. So I think it is clear beforehand and after. This morning, for instance, you also had Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth clearly declaring here, in a moment that should make a lot of the MAGA base happy to hear, this mission, quote, was not and has not been about regime change. In other words, we're not trying to invade Iran. We're not trying to topple the government in Tehran. This is basically, in the U.S.'s eyes, what we want to be a one-off situation that you basically don't hear much of after this. Take a listen.
Yeah. So is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
So again, I'll say here, guys, I fully believe the administration when they say their goal is not regime change. And the reason for that is not blind loyalty to Trump. It's, in my opinion, probably a genuine calculation from him that, hey, I think there's something of an understanding, yes, even inside the White House right now, that when you campaign on no new wars, when you've basically been against the Iraq war, and that's a big aspect of your political career, it's not Donald Trump's intention in any way to get America into a second coming of that. Now, that in mind, again, here is the leadership challenge, is if Iran retaliates. And also, by the way, to mention our ally Israel, whatever, that Benjamin Netanyahu does indeed want regime change war in Iran. He has been calling for this for decades now. Okay, it's not coy. He's on tape. He's done it many times. It's clear that he is way more aggressive about this from the start than America or especially the Trump administration ever were. That can you balance all of those interests, right? Again, we'll have to see. As I've been saying since the start, what Donald Trump is doing here is he's playing a game of high stakes gambling. Okay, so that can either pay off really well and Trump looks like a genius by the end of it, or as I said, right, I think if you do get into a wider war, that's going to be a serious problem on his presidency. So again, so can he quash it right now? That's what we're going to talk about here and, kind of break down and analyze. But with that said, we also have here, as you'll take a listen, J.D. Vance reacting this morning on Meet the Press to the successful, yes, by the way, U.S. airstrike on Iran's facilities. He is uttering similar sentiments saying, quote, "We are not at war with Iran. We are at war with Iran's nuclear program. We destroyed that uranium, and we did it without endangering the American pilots." Take a listen here for yourself.
We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And let me just say, Kristen, that we're incredibly grateful and proud of the American Air Force pilots who did an incredible job last night. The operation was really extraordinary. These guys flew from Missouri. They didn't land a single time. They dropped 30,000-pound bombs on a target the size of a washing machine, and then got back home safely without ever landing in the Middle East or ever stopping other than to briefly refuel. And of course, they did that in the air. So it's really an incredible operation, a testament to the power of American military. And I think what shows what can happen when you have that great American military in the hands of capable presidential leadership. What we did is we destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. I think we set that program back substantially, and we did it without endangering the lives of the American pilots. That's an incredible thing, and I think we all should be proud. Whatever our politics, we should be proud of what these guys accomplished. A very, very high impact mission under a lot of pressure.
Right. So again, clear message here, by the way, also reported by Reuters, that that's not what the administration is looking for. We're not pushing a regime change. There is also reporting here they diplomatically reached out to the Iranian government, basically saying, we don't really want anything else from here. This is our standing down. Like, we don't need to deal with this. We don't need to keep fighting each other, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all in mind. That's a positive sign if you're anti-war like I am, right? And you value that as a serious aspect of the MAGA movement that we've always been about. Now, with that in mind, here is the big question, as I'm going to keep on saying. Will Iran retaliate, and what will that look like? Well, I think J.D. Vance does make a good point there, which is, first and foremost, if you're going to carry out this strike, it's objectively a good thing if you're going to kind of cross that bridge, that it was successful. And as was pointed out here by Pete Hegseth just this morning, which, by the way, okay, say whatever you will about the greater situation. Can we finally put to rest, okay, the very idea that he was unqualified or incapable of doing this? Because when you look at both the strikes on the Houthis and now the strike on Iran, that, I have my, questions about, but objectively from a military perspective was extremely successful, extremely well done, well executed. And frankly, I'm honestly a little surprised, to tell you the truth, that despite, years of being beaten down and all of that, our military still has this capability in 2025. So, props to all of that. But as you can see here, Hegseth kind of puts that out there to the Iranians, basically saying, well, is it really in your self-interest to retaliate, considering what you just saw here from the United States? And we'll talk more about that in a second. But first of all, take a listen as Pete Hegseth here himself, trying to get Iran to not retaliate, just trying to get them to stand down, says, quote, "Iran is calculating the reality. Yes, that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected, over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites. It was indeed impressive." Here's what Hegseth is trying to send the message here to the Iranians to say.
Of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected, over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future. And we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud.
Right. Well, I think the big question here is, will Iran ultimately act within their own genuine self-interest? and maybe that's a piece of good news, but it's also a question, will they do it? It is genuinely, yes, in Iran's best self-interest to not retaliate in any meaningful way, right? Because it's not good for Iran either, right? It's not good for us, but it's also not good for Iran, obviously, if America ends up pursuing some type of regime change war. Clearly, as you can see, they are losing this battle, right? They've kind of been beaten back over the past couple of years. Their proxies are weakened. They themselves do not have control over their own airspace, etc. So the hope here, yes, is Iran will basically say, okay, enough is enough. Maybe we'll do something performative like in 2020 where we intentionally missed, but hey, we basically told our people, we save face with them, everything is fine, let's all move on because of it. But, you know, I think the Soleimani thing and nuclear on their own territory is objectively a little bit different. And yes, this is a precarious situation, but here's all of us, right, hoping the Iranians basically understand the rational perspective. This is not a battle they can win. It is a good thing in that sense that, right, the strike was effective. And, you know, we basically move on from this and never really speak about it again. It's funny, some of the current hysterical people, if a week from now, basically nothing has happened, I really question whether, you know, they'll come back to the tent or they'll admit they were wrong, whatever it is. But anyways, so let's get into it. What actually is the Iranian retaliation thus far? Well, nothing on the military front yet. We'll see what happens. We'll see if they do something, right? But it is worth noting here, the big news of today is that in response to all of this, the Iranian parliament has just ordered the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, which you can see right there. That is the strait. This is significant, of course, because over 20% of global oil production flows through this strait. Now, it's unclear whether they'll actually follow through on this, but this is something the parliament, yes, has voted to do. And on the surface, that sounds like a really bad thing that could seriously disrupt the economy, U.S. global national security, etc. When you hear, yes, 20% of oil flows through that strait. However, I think it is worth noting here at the same time, again, the sort of question of how far is Iran really going to take this, that when you actually break down the amount of oil that the U.S. gets from the Hormuz Strait, you can see it only currently consists of 5% of America's total oil supply, right? We do not get a lot of our oil from this region. And that is not to say, by the way, that there would be absolutely no economic impact on the average American, because if global oil and energy prices go up, you will probably see some type of correlation with America, even if it's a lesser coefficient or whatever. But, you know, it is worth noting here, if this is Iran's big way to retaliate or show something against the Americans, it kind of does show they're a little bit out of options, right? Like, that's just not something that's going to work. Again, it might cause some uncomfortability. And, you know, people will probably criticize Trump if gas prices go up and all that. But again, is this something that really is going to catastrophically hit back at America? Probably not. But it's also worth noting. So again, that's sort of from the perspective that, well, maybe Iran is a paper tiger in the sense, maybe they don't really have much to retaliate with. And I think that is also the hope that people are currently making. It's also worth noting here, by the way, on the question of how serious really are they, that while only 5% of America's total oil supply flows through there, 50% of China's total oil supply does. Iran and China are obviously sort of allies in the modern day because of the, you know, new access basically of the anti-American kind of, you know, alliances, etc. So it's sort of counterproductive, one would think, to say, hey, we're going to do this big thing that sure will affect Europe a decent amount. I think Europe gets about 15% of their oil, 20%, somewhere around there. So it will have some impact on Europe, really impact their allies of China, not really do much to the U.S. Is that all Iran has up their sleeve, right? Again, that's something that would suggest, okay, I'm not sure they're really going to see a massive scale retaliation. So as you can see, yeah, only 5% of U.S. oil goes through it. 50% of China does, not to mention those Middle Eastern countries. Now, with that in mind, this is something, of course, that the Trump administration has responded to Iran, potentially closing this to say. Marco Rubio went on Fox today to state, quote, it will be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it, and we retain options to deal with that. So really, you have to argue this is something that likely would hurt Iran more than it would hurt necessarily the U.S. Take a listen.
Do you expect Iran to move to close the Strait of Hormuz to try to disrupt oil transportation across the world?
Well, I encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that, because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that, it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that. But other countries should be looking at that as well. It would hurt other countries' economies a lot worse than ours. It would be, I think, a massive escalation that would merit a response, not just by us, but from others. So, look, they're going to say what they need to say. You know, these are the things that need to happen for their own internal politics and so forth. But in the end, we're going to judge them by the actions that they take moving forward. We had 3 objectives. We struck those 3 objectives with decisive force, and that was the point of this mission, and that's what we achieved. What happens next will depend on what they do. They want to negotiate, we're ready to negotiate. They want to get cute and do things that are dangerous, we have responses available that are devastating.
Right, well, that is the gamble that the Trump administration is making at the moment, and what I'm hoping ends up paying off, and I kind of think will. You know, I give it a majority chance, but anything can happen, obviously. Which is basically to say, well, the Iranians are going to realize we don't have a lot left to fight with. We got to do something maybe to save face, but are we really going to have a serious response to it? Are we going to harm Americans, whatever? I mean, they did put out a statement today saying, hey, watch out, like we're going to do something, but will they actually follow through? Or will this be another 2020 situation? You know, that's something we're ultimately going to have to see. The reason the Trump administration is making the gamble is basically to say, look, if we have control of Iranian airspace, we just went in and did this, we were successful. It's kind of a message to Iran, look, you cannot win this, come to the negotiating table, or at the very least, let's just all stand down, okay? But again, we're going to have to see what happens. This is a precarious situation. As I'm going to keep on saying, Trump owns the consequences of what happens here, whether that's, you know, full reward, full negative consequences. It's a situation we're all going to have to find out, and we're certainly praying for peace here, to say the least. So with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Do you think it basically stops from here? Are you concerned about potential retaliation? You know, maybe even on the American homeland, as people are, some people are speculating, God forbid, right? Let me know. Be sure, guys, here to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.